Eric Webster, how are you?
Hey man, I'm good. Good to see you.
You too. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and your knowledge with the creative community. I think it'll be very helpful, very inspiring, and a lot of insights can come forth with this conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Let me give the audience a brief intro here for you so they get a feel for who I'm about to start talking with. You are a lifestyle engineer and hypnotherapist. Your practice in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where you guide clients through hypnosis and mindset techniques to reprogram their beliefs, behaviors, and lifestyle patterns. You're an expert in Akashic record work with over 12 years of experience delivering transformative Akashic record readings, often integrating into hypnosis sessions to uncover life purpose, insights, and blockages. You're the creator of the virtual gastric band program, where you combine personal experience with the VBG or BGB protocol to help clients achieve sustainable, non surgical weight loss through hypnotherapy, boosting high success rates and profound mindset change. Media featured thought leader. You've appeared on Catherine Llewellyn's Truth and Transcendence podcast, Functional Health Today, WZZM 13's My West Michigan, and interviewed by the Mystic Bag, showcasing your expertise to diverse audiences. And you're a recognized authority in holistic healing, selected for inclusion in Shay Parker's Best American Psychics, the American Association of Psychics and Healers, LLC, and 3 Best Rated, highlighting your credibility in psychic and healing communities and modalities. It's always been fascinating for me.
One slight correction.
Okay.
I do work with the virtual gastric band, but I am not the creator of the protocol. That was Sheila Granger out of the UK
Okay.
created it, and that's who I got my certification and training for the virtual gastric band from Sheila.
Got you.
So, love to give credit where it's due.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was my mistake in creating and setting that up for
No
you.
worries. No worries.
So, like we were talking a little bit beforehand, there's not really a whole lot of structure to it other than my first initial question, and that is, where were you born and what was life like as a kid for Eric?
Ooh. I was born in Dearborn, Michigan. Deers are born in Dearborn.
All right.
At the time, my father was a Dearborn City police officer. Um, and when we moved to Carson City, which is hour outside of Lansing, north and west. It's a nothing, I shouldn't say that. Maybe somebody I grew up with might see this and be offended. But for me, I graduated with 125 kids in my class, and that was back in 71. I think there were 1,100 people there at the time. There's a prison there now, so there's probably more people.
Okay.
My dad was hired as the first police officer in Carson City ever, and ended up having to get deputized by the Montcalm County Sheriff's Department because if he was chasing a traffic offender and they crossed over the city limit line, which of course was, given how small the city was, it didn't take a
Yeah.
lot to get there. He
Right.
couldn't pursue them out into the county without having that deputy sheriff designation and authority. He later then went on to work for the Michigan Department of Corrections in one of the prisons in Ionia. My mother was a registered nurse who got
Okay.
her training in the Army, and she's from Pennsylvania, was born and raised on a farm in Pennsylvania.
Gotcha.
And I have two older sisters. Um, right now, we are 72, 73, and 74. but in October, they each go up a year.
Okay.
So then we'll be 72, 74, 75. Um, our only vehicle was the cop car in Carson City.
Really?
Um, Although my sister told me the other day that that was actually our car, that the city put the bubble on and the siren. I was young enough, I didn't really know that.
Yeah.
Um, Small towns are interesting with everybody being in everybody else's business no matter what.
For
But
sure.
when your father is the cop,
Yeah.
it always felt like there were maybe more eyes on me than there might have otherwise been. But I mean, perfect kid? Oh, hell no. But within reason.
Yeah.
I started working when I was 14. My first job was a traveling food concession that went from one fair to the next. Man, that was long hours, and
Oh,
uh,
I can imagine.
I think that's where I first drank Southern Comfort uh, after a hard day, and then I got a job in a local restaurant, and I did, and I say this way specifically, I did 30 years in the restaurant business,
Yeah.
and if it sounds like a prison sentence, yeah, maybe, but I loved it, and I was very good at it. Was glad I got it out of the way, young enough to go on and do other things. So,
Okay.
but yeah, not the most pleasant childhood I could have imagined. Um, my father and I were estranged from the mid 70s until he passed away 5 years ago.
Okay.
And he was part of a cult that was based in Carson City. And they
Mm,
were really local TV here in Grand Rapids a few years ago did an expose on they were called the Shermanites. And the fundamentalist women in long skirts, even when they went swimming,
gotcha.
women were the secondary, honor your man, he's the
Yep.
boss, all of that sort of bullshit.
Yep.
A lot of stories that are pretty revolting about what is alleged to have gone on,
Okay.
and still can. I mean, they're still there, um,
Still around
still
to this.
around.
Wow.
Yeah, I had a cigar with Ken Kolker, who was the journalist who did the expose one time, and it was shortly after it aired. And I said, "So you've been going to Carson City, huh? What a wild bunch!" And his eyebrows went up, and I said, "Did you come across Dwayne Webster in your travels?" And he pulled out his phone and looked at his notes, and he said, "Yeah, I really wanted to talk to him, but I never got a chance." I said, "Oh, that's my father." And so we had a pretty good conversation about what that all entailed.
Right. Right.
But um, but that, I was pretty well, I was late teens or even maybe off to college by the time he got heavily involved with that
Okay.
group. But corporal punishment of children and spouses was relatively commonplace.
Yeah.
And so I do still digest and watch documentaries and stories about cult. There was one I watched recently. I don't remember what the title of it was. I think it was on Netflix, but it was a cult out of Traverse City, Michigan, that
Okay.
was pretty horrific, number one,
Yeah.
but also pretty big.
Right.
And so I find all that sort of stuff. And when I look at it through the lens of I'm an ordained minister, I'm
Okay.
a hypnotherapist, I work in the Akashic Record, which is the
Yeah.
history of our soul.
Yeah.
Um, I guess it's probably kind of natural that I would be drawn to the aberration, my view
Yeah.
of what faith and relationship with the Creator uh, looks like in various environments.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. Did you have much of a relationship with your grandparents as a kid?
My maternal grandmother died before I was born.
Okay.
They were from Pennsylvania, and Grandpa Metzger, uh, I didn't see him a lot. I mean, he still had the farm, so he wasn't traveling much.
Yeah.
But what I remember of him is just a very dear, wonderful man. I mean, Pennsylvania Dutch, so the whole
Yeah.
idea of, yeah, they don't make a big fuss about anything.
Right.
Oh, he really liked that. How could you tell?
Yeah.
Was sort of the buzzword there. Um, my father's parents lived 5 minute, 10-minute walk from where we lived in Carson City. So
Okay.
I was around them more. Um, Mac was a kind of a jack of all trades,
Hmm.
carpenters, repairs, plumbing, remodeling. Um, I think that they owned some rentals, probably. They, yeah, it isn't hard to see how my father, the apple, maybe didn't fall far from the tree
Okay.
in terms of who he grew up to be.
Gotcha.
Um, I have made amends with my grandmother. Uh, Here we go. Here we go into woo-wooville. Um, she's been deceased for, gosh, my son was still in his undergrad years, and that's got to be 20, 25 years ago or more.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm a Reiki master. So every night as I get ready to go to bed, I activate Reiki. I always have a list of people and situations here on Earth that are wanting some healing energy sent. But then I also do a more global healing. Oftentimes I'll be sending healing energy now into Ukraine or into Gaza or certainly into Washington, D.C.
Right.
And Lansing. Um, and my grandmother presented from the spirit side and wanted to be part of the team. And at first I said, "Oh, no, huh, no, no, got no room for you at the table." And then ultimately we had a good conversation and came to a better understanding. And so now she is a part of the team. And then
Right.
after my father passed, he also showed up, and I said, "Oh, hell no." And I had done a lot of forgiveness work, and some of it was pretty transformational for me. And
Sure.
so I was really in neutral for a very long time. No, held no grudge, nothing. And I read Sacred Contracts, which is a book by Carolyn Mace,
Yep.
and about the contracts that we form in the spirit side before we come into a life. And what a paradigm shifter that was for me in terms of understanding that he was the father I asked him to be, even when he totally sucked. But there was good and valid reasons that I needed him, wanted him to be that way. And again, I'll own the fact that from where I live, I can't even see perfect. It's not even on the menu.
Yeah.
But I do believe that I go through my life day by day attempting to do no harm. And when, as a father, I had a quandary, I'd go, well, what would Dwayne do? Okay, well, clearly the answer is in the other direction. So,
Right.
but that book helped me to understand that he loved me enough to be the asshole that he was, to help shape me into the man that I have become, and even at 72, I am still becoming. And
Right.
so,
Right.
what a wonderful gift that book was. And I don't care if every relationship in your life looks really wonderful and peachy. I
Yeah.
recommend that book because I think that it can just shift the thought pattern and the understanding of
Yeah.
the why and the wherefore. We invited everybody.
Yeah.
Apparently, you and I sat down at some point and said, "Hey,
Right.
September 3rd, 2025, let's do a podcast, whatever that is,
Yeah.
because then we would not have had that even any knowledge of what podcasts were. And
Sure.
I'll laugh and I'll say, and my last name is Webster, and
Yeah.
obviously I get my words wholesale. And so I go on, and if I'm ever just going too far off the track, just stop me.
No, you're good. You're good. I look at it all from the perspective if it's just flavor for everything else that's going to come out. Just information that's going to fill in the whole storyline. As a young kid in elementary school, did you find yourself being one of those kids that wanted to maybe be the center of attention, or did you feel you were more wanting to sit in the back, not even be recognized, don't want to be called on, just want to blend?
Under under the radar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you. Were you able to make friends fairly easy at all at that point?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had some good childhood friends, and then all the way through, high school. Other than Facebook, I'm not in touch with
Gotcha.
anybody
Sure.
from those years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And
Okay.
by fifth grade, then I joined the band. Um, Junior high and high school, I was the drum major.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
yeah,
So you
which
got some musicality to you.
yeah, I tried to learn the cello a few years ago because I've always just the cello goes right from my ear to my heart. And so I got a cello and I took lessons for a year and a half, and I decided it sounded more like I was torturing the poor thing than getting music out of it. So then I took piano lessons for a while, and but I love music, and my son is a professional bass trombonist,
Okay.
and so he has turned me on to an awful lot of wonderful music that I would have never encountered had it not been for him. My
Yeah.
daughter was a mean trumpet player in high school, but she didn't have the passion for that Jared had.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, love music.
Amazing. Amazing. How about sports? Were you athletic at all once you got into junior high, high school?
I was 6'2" in junior high, and I played basketball seventh and eighth grade, and then junior varsity.
Okay.
But other than being tall, there was not a lot of skill there,
All right.
and there was not a lot of desire to
To
probably
be in
work
that.
hard enough to get good at it.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And as an adult, I don't follow sports. I mean, the kids and I used to go to the Tigers games once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've been to a few Red Wings games, and now that the Lions and the Tigers are really they've come back
Yeah.
way better than maybe anybody ever thought they would. I've actually watched a few Tiger games and a few Lions games in the last couple of years.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Did you, as a kid, did you experience a sensitivity and a knowingness about things that weren't always seen by everybody else?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think that I think that all came later.
Later. Okay.
Um, I'm trying to think. I mean, from the mid to late 70s, I was pretty intrigued with everything spiritual and metaphysical. And
Yeah.
I probably read every book that Dr. Wayne Dyer ever wrote. I
Yeah.
saw him speak in person in Bay City one time. Um, all the Hay House stuff, and
Yeah.
All of that is so intriguing to me. The Abraham Hicks,
Yeah.
I actually saw them in Chicago one time.
Okay.
Um, so I've been around, and there used to be a gal. Um, she was sort of a scary looking gypsy woman, although she probably wasn't, who was a fortune teller.
Yeah.
And I bet I was like 18 or 19, and I went there with my mother
Okay.
for a reading. And so that was sort of that opened a whole nother world to me.
Right.
That still, I mean, now I give readings,
Yeah.
but on occasion I still will get one as a consumer
Right.
and find great value. Um, and of course, as somebody who does that professionally, I'm quite picky about who I receive a reading from. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and I think that people by and large need to be. My favorite, when I'm doing a psychic fair, I see people walking around and around and around, and I know that what they're doing is just allowing themselves to feel who are the practitioners that I feel drawn to,
Yes.
and then they go there, and
Yeah.
that's like I love when people do that because they're exercising their own intuition,
Yeah.
and at the same time they're trusting the information that they're receiving. And
Right.
that's big. That's a big thing.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. As you're in the band in high school and you're experiencing this musical expression, and I'm guessing being in band, you got fairly good at it. Otherwise, you don't really stay into it very long. Did you have thoughts of maybe going into that towards college or any direction in that way towards
there
college?
was some time that I seriously considered becoming a band director.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was there a thought of that in terms of maybe selecting a college as you're getting towards the end of high school?
Yeah. I mean, I went to Central Michigan,
Okay.
which back then I think was sort of predominantly known as a teacher's college.
Right, right.
I was a special ed major for a while, looked at audiology because they have a really good speech pathology and audiology department there.
All right.
I never did graduate. Um, I probably majored in draft beer and tequila more than would have made good sense for
Gotcha.
somebody that wanted to be successful.
Sure. Well,
So
that's part of what that experience ends up being for a lot of
yeah.
people. So I
And that's
wouldn't
how
say
I
it was
got into
out
the
of the
restaurant and bar business. So
norm.
it did
Okay.
serve me on some level.
Okay. How did that transition for you? How did that come about?
Well, my brother-in-law, former brother-in-law now, of course, um, was the general manager of the Hotel Chieftain in
Okay.
Mount Pleasant.
Yeah.
And they had the side door saloon, which was, maybe 125 seats, but they had good bands, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And my sister was the day bartender at the side door. And so when I didn't have class, I'd go sit at the side door and catch up with my sister and drink for free. And then they needed a doorman,
Okay.
and so I did that. And then was the janitor. I'd go in the next morning and vacuum and mop and clean everything. Have it ready to go for the next day. And then gradually, just I got trained as a bartender and went on from there.
Okay.
So yeah,
So education at that point was kind of like, don't really want to go further in it. I just want to earn some money and make money and
yeah.
experience some
But I
life.
wanted to stay in college because I did not want to go to Vietnam.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The process of becoming a bartender and then transitioning into the restaurant world, how did that come across your radar?
Well, when I was in high school, I worked at that little diner,
Yeah.
and so I was a waiter, and then eventually became a cook. And so I already had that part of the background, in my toolbox, so to speak, and then added the bartending. And then when I left college, moved to Bay City, I was dating a woman who I was married to for 30 years
Okay.
and got a job with Sambo's,
Gotcha.
just a short order cook job, but then shortly was promoted to assistant manager. And then shortly after that, got in line for having my own restaurant within the Sambo's organization. So, that opened up in, oh God, August of 78, maybe.
Okay.
And I was there for a couple of years because Jared was born in September of 80. And I think it was January of 81 that I parted company with Sambo's. So, and then just did a variety of other restaurant management and ownership kinds of things.
Okay.
So,
Did you find that industry appealing and satisfying for your soul?
oh yeah, I loved it. I
Okay.
loved it. Um, and the more authority and the more freedom that I had to create and shape what was going on, the
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Uh, Obviously, in the Sambo's system, it was like pretty well spelled out.
Right.
Um, but when I owned my own place in Bay City, um, I put it together the way I wanted it and ran it accordingly. And we were critically acclaimed. We made the top 10 restaurants in the Saginaw, Midland, and Bay City market one
Okay.
year. Um, but we were grossly undercapitalized, as so many small businesses are.
Right.
And then the rains came, rain like we'd never seen before. And in Saginaw, there were houses where the foundation was folding in on itself, and the houses were falling into the hole, and flooding. It was horrible. And so I had about 10 days where there was nobody doing anything. And so that pushed me over the edge into, yeah, I can't keep this going anymore.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
With having that ability to kind of craft the environment, did you feel a real joy of kind of um, being a servant to the community, so to speak, as a restaurant owner?
Yeah, I don't guess I've ever really thought about it in that light, but sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, trying to find the niche
Yeah.
of what was lacking in the community
Yeah.
without going too far. I did mesquite grilling in the 70s in Bay City, which
Okay.
was pretty crazy actually in hindsight. Used to have all my wood shipped in from Texas. Um, and it was really good. It was wonderful food.
I imagine.
A little bit ahead of the market. Bay City at that point was more all you can eat than high quality.
Okay.
And I was more about quality.
Nice.
So yeah,
Nice. Yeah, I've talked to a few chefs, know a few chefs as well, and they truly enjoy um, just being of service, kind of providing that
yep,
sustenance, right, for the guests that come in. That seems to be something that's kind of true to their heart uh,
sure,
with those experiences and being able to
yeah,
feed people physically. Um, sometimes it's not always for the sole purpose, but at least physically taking care of them.
But don't you think that the energy of the intention gets embedded in
Yeah.
every bit of food that's created,
Yeah.
and so it nourishes body and soul
Yeah.
if that intention is that in that kind of an alignment.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. I
Yeah,
definitely look at it like that. It's not always the case when talking with them. Do they are they able to tap into that?
sure.
Um, Once you start to get to a point of being tired of being in the restaurant business, and we had a little conversation prior to hitting record about some of the things that corporate was doing that created a little bit of that uh, animosity. Um, what were your thoughts of? I think I may want to go in this direction now rather than stay in this environment.
Well, my then wife and I decided at one point, it would have been 19, dates don't matter, but 1988 probably, we decided that we were going to relocate to Grand Rapids.
Okay.
And she was a school teacher, and the district that she was in offered a buyout, um, get the payrolls down a bit. And she had a pretty good longevity there and was at the top of the pay scale. So she cashed out of that. And for about a year, I was submitting resumes thinking that I'd stay in restaurant. But in Grand Rapids, it's enough bigger town that they wanted everybody to have some sort of a food and beverage management degree. And
Uh,
all I had was 25 years experience, right? So they didn't want to talk to me. And it ended up being perfect. Um, I had a friend who had moved to Grand Rapids years before. He had been a Revlon cosmetics salesperson.
okay.
And when he moved to Grand Rapids, then he got into residential real estate and did really well. And he was a hardworking guy. And I thought, gosh, if Larry can be successful in real estate, I certainly ought to be able to.
Yeah.
And so I talked with the broker of then the largest company in Grand Rapids and went through the training and got my license and got hired right away by that company. And it wasn't quite the falling off a rock, get rich kind of life that I had falsely assumed it to be. It was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a good, solid company and a lot of good mentors and friends that helped, raise me up um, to be successful in that business. And I did that for 30 years. Um, Only three companies. A lot of people jump around, but man, I stayed put in a couple of cases, maybe longer than made good sense, but at the time it worked out. Um, but then what, 15 years ago, plus or minus, I started going down the road with all the spiritual, metaphysical, Reiki, Akashic Records, hypnotherapy,
Yeah.
and so 12 or 13 years ago, I opened an office for that work. And I was doing it nights and weekends while I was working real estate. I was in a corporate position then, essentially the chief operating officer of a significant company
Okay.
that's kind of all over the state now. Um, but but the whole foreclosure thing was going on,
Mm,
and I just could not stand the idea of making a living on the backs of people's heartache and pain. And
right.
so I kind of dialed back, got myself into just a world of financial trouble, with no money coming in and obligations.
Yeah.
And so then I gradually transitioned into doing this full time. And I parked my license, gosh, I don't know, 3 years ago maybe.
Okay.
And now I'm debating if I'm going to even bother to renew it. It's time to renew, and I'm like, do I want to do the Con Ed and pay the fees to renew, or do I just want to let it go?
Yeah.
So, because I'll never see myself going back to that.
Right. Right. Was there a specific instance that you can remember or think of that really opened you up to the idea of the spiritual realm outside of the earthly realm that started you on that path?
Hmm. I can't think of a specific event or thing, but I would say that it just became the draw toward all
Okay.
of that became more and more powerful.
Yeah.
And the people that I met at classes and workshops and trainings, they were all very in alignment with kind of where I wanted to be and how I wanted to go. Um, and of course, when you're open, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
But one thing leads to another. I mean, there's a Coptic organization in West Michigan, and so I had an Akashic record reading with a guy who was affiliated with the Coptics, and he said, "You really need to take a look at our training." And I did. And so I ended up going through 3 years of, 5 or 6 weekends a year kind of training with the Coptics and ended up being ordained.
Okay.
Um, and so one of the women that was in the class that I was being ordained with was a Reiki master. And so she was doing a weekend retreat with Reiki training and attunements. So,
Okay.
okay, that's next. And then another situation came up with a, a convention that I went to where I had a week-long workshop, 3 hours a day, in the Akashic Record.
Yeah.
So, it all just sort of, if I guess it was, I was ready and I allowed it. And one thing just led to another, to another, to another.
Right.
So, yeah.
When did you start seeing that hypnotherapy was something you wanted to start getting in tune with to help other people deal with certain things that they were struggling with?
Well, way back in Bay City in the 70s, one of my management trainees at the Sambo's restaurant I ran
Uh-huh.
turned me on to Jose Silva and the
Okay.
Silva method.
Got it.
And it was called the Silva mind control method. And that was back in the era of Hare Krishnas and Moonies and all the rest. So
Yeah.
I think they stepped away from mind control because it had a little too cultish of a feel to the title. And
Right.
so for quite a while, they were Jose Silva Ultramind. And I read the book and played around with that and really was intriguing. The exercises and things showed me that it was real. And
Okay.
then when we moved to Grand Rapids, there was a guy out of Muskegon who was teaching the Silva method. And so I did a couple of weekends with them, and one of them was kind of a medical intuition
Okay.
exercise.
Yeah.
And we were grouped into three people in a group. One was the subject, only it was like the guy in my trio, it was his wife that I was reading for the medical intuition, but he was like the conduit to his wife. There was another guy that was the observer and he took notes. And then I was the one, you know, drawing information. And one of the things that I it stuck with me is if I said something that didn't resonate with the husband, his response would be, could be so. recognizing that he doesn't necessarily know 100% of everything,
Sure.
but there was a different response if it was a hit, if it was on target. Oh my God, that's accurate. And more of them than not were on target.
Okay.
And it was just like, hmm. And so that was sort of my first experience in a medical intuitive sort of arena.
Yeah.
And then when I got my Reiki attunements, we did a Reiki circle at the Coptic organization, and there was a dear sweet woman. She and her husband became wonderful friends over the years. And so she's sitting in a chair and I'm doing Reiki. And I just got a sense of some energy disruption in her upper chest. So when we were all done, I kneeled down beside her and I said, okay, I'm really new at this. So um, I don't have any idea, but I just got a real energy disruption in your upper chest. And I'm not telling you there's anything bad, but if there's something going on there, please don't ignore it. And you might want to have a conversation with your physician just to check out if there is anything going on. Well, I
Right.
didn't see her for a month. And then she pulled me off to the side and she said, I have to tell you, I already had a doctor's appointment scheduled when you did Reiki and you gave me that information, and you were right. She said, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, but it was so incredibly early that they did a lumpectomy and she was on some sort of an oral uh, chemo
Yeah.
that she had to be on for a few years. But last I knew, she was still live and kicking, and she's got to be well into her 80s by now.
Amazing.
So it was like, oh my God,
Right.
that again, that confirmation and that affirmation of, oh, I trusted that
Right.
and I allowed it. Trust and allow are two really huge words with me.
Okay.
And so that was that validation of the information that I received was accurate. And there's no way that Eric Webster, human, on his own could get that information. So that just sort of opened up. Reiki was a game changer, man. It opened up all kinds of good stuff
Yeah.
and kind of propelled me down the road with all this.
Okay.
So,
Very cool. The audience at this point may be completely confused as to why we're
and
having this conversation.
who can blame them?
Right. So I want to give just a little bit of background from my side so that it can get a little bit of understanding of why me as the artist and the platform as the artist recovery is even talking to someone like yourself and with the expertise and experience you've had, but also too now that you shared some of your story, how the parallels are relatable. So both sides of my family are from East Tennessee, mother and
Okay.
father side. They were both married prior to getting married. When they did get married, my father had already had a few trips up here to Michigan because his sister and brother-in-law were stationed at Selfridge Air Force Base.
Oh, okay.
And so he had been up here, saw what kind of the environment was like. He left school at eighth grade, started working with his father on different farms around the area, and then eventually got into doing mechanics. And so, with the auto industry being here, came up here in the 60s, uh, had the opportunity to get work that was regular. So they did that. Um, at that point in time, my mother's father, my grandfather on that side, he was working at Wholesome Defense in Kingsport, Tennessee. where they were making the bombs and different things like that,
Oh,
ordinances for the military.
okay.
Um, Eventually, he transitioned into becoming a Southern Baptist minister and had a farm as well. So when you mention your,
Bomb maker to Southern Baptist minister. That seems like a
oh,
natural progression.
it's a winding trail that he had. I mean,
Yeah.
he went out to California at 14 and worked in the CC camps out in California, the conservation camps.
Okay.
So he left home with a fake ID at 14 and went all the way out there. So he's had quite a storied life. Um, so Southern Baptist minister, and had a farm that he did work throughout the week. Usually on the weekends is when he would go into his church that he had.
Hmm.
When my parents came up here, they had me a couple years after, and I was a highly sensitive child. Um, Early on, probably as far back as 3, 4 years old, um, I remember being able to see spirits.
Mm.
And I had this group of 4 that would come to me on a regular basis. And it was a male spirit, a female spirit, and then a little male and female. So it seemed like either parents and children or mother, children, and a father, whether it was her father, however. I always had this sense of calmness and peace and comfort around the female and then the 2 children.
Hmm.
But I always felt the strong anger energy of the male that would come in. And I could always tell when they were going to come because I could sense his energy first. I always felt it. And at that time, I was scared because I didn't understand what it was, didn't know what it was, never told my parents about it. So I had no way of communicating and trying to suss that out. Um, End up going to public school up until 3rd grade. At 3rd grade, I was offered an opportunity to go into a program called Project Plus, which was going to allow me to go to the high school in the afternoons to do art classes and swim in the pool and play in the gym, different things like that.
Nice.
So
Okay.
it was kind of like looked at as you have potential to do some more than what you're doing here just in elementary school. We want to expose you to some of that. But at that time too, my parents had started really getting into going back to church. And so they started going to this fundamental Baptist church that decided to start a school. And so going into 4th grade, my parents pulled me out of public school, put me into this private Christian school. It was fundamental Baptist. And I was going to have to basically start all over in terms of figuring out who friends were, figuring out if I was even going to have an opportunity to explore art and creativity, that whole scenario. So I was in that environment for quite a while. One of the things growing up, too, that I always remembered and loved about going back to Tennessee, because I was born here in Michigan, but we would go back to Tennessee for summers and holidays to visit all the family because most everybody was there.
Hmm.
And my dad he's one of 11
Oh,
children, so
my.
quite a few. My mom, one of 4. So I had quite of extended families in there. And so fast forward um, a little bit in terms of being around my grandfather, who's the farmer, and being on the farm, which when you said your grandfather at a farm in Pennsylvania, I was like, oh, I know exactly what that environment looks like.
Yep.
I've truly, truly felt like I was at home with my grandparents on that farm. And it was always comforting for me. And him and I would always go out and do stuff and be about town and work in the fields and take care of the animals and all that kind of stuff. And then weekend would come and we'd go to his church. And I always felt comfortable in that church. It didn't feel like what I was experiencing back home either. Um, so it was strange for me to try and figure that out. Um, at 11 years old, he unexpectedly died of a massive heart attack. And that was my first experience with death at that point in time. And so, to the point I couldn't go to the funeral. Like, I did not want to go. I did not want to see what that looked like. I didn't want to experience that. So fortunately, one of my uncles was his girlfriend at the time. She decided she would stay back and look after the kids, and that way I didn't have to go. Coming back to Michigan, back into the private school, Christian school, all of that dogma, things that entailed in terms of strictness, way you're supposed to operate, how you're supposed to respect authority, listen, fall in line, so on and so forth. And I'm starting to ramp into my own creative expression with artistic things that I'm doing. And they really didn't have any art classes there. So the art came about just out of opportunities and necessities, and was able to end up creating the monogram for the Letterman jackets for the upperclassmen, designed that. They ended up using that the entire time that the school was open. Once I got into playing soccer and basketball and stuff like that, especially soccer, we would go out and I would paint the center of the field with the school's logo just by hand. We didn't have any fancy machines to be able to do it, but I was doing it by hand. And eventually, because a couple of the upperclassmen went off to school to Pensacola Christian in Florida to study, that was presented as an opportunity for me as well. And I was looking at it from the perspective of, I thought I wanted to go into graphic design, thought that would be the easiest way for me to progress, because my first job was in the restaurant industry as well, working for Tubby's Incorporated. And was moving up quickly there, as you did with your business. But my goal was to get into the advertising department at the corporate office. And the store that I worked at was owned by the CEO at the time. So I thought, all right, I'll go off to college, study graphic design, be able to go into advertising. I can work for Tubby's in the advertising department and help progress that. Got to Pensacola, realized that that was more of a restrictive environment than what I was even experiencing at the high school and the junior high. Immediately thrown into this scarcity mindset of, oh crap, I've got to toe the line on everything here. Otherwise, I'm going to get kicked out. I'm going to lose all this money that I've saved up to try and do these classes. And it was just extra stress. On top of that, I was going to have to work as well. So I wanted to work outdoors because it's Florida. I thought it'd be great. I'll get outdoors, I'll get a tan, be able to experience the environment of Florida, palm trees and different things like that. Until they looked at what my resume was and saw that I worked in the restaurant industry at home. And they put me in the kitchen. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get away I need a break. So I ended up having to work in the kitchen for the time that I was there, working, serving food to the entire school staff, everything. Hated it. It was progressing, getting worse and worse. in terms of the amount of stress that was built up. And also, too, I wasn't doing well in my other classes other than my art. I was doing well in my art, but not the other stuff that I had to make up to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And so that started the spiral of my depression and anxiety becoming more enhanced. Ultimately ended up dropping out of school, coming back to Tubby's, work for them, went in to see the CEO 3 different times with the portfolio to try and get into the advertising. Told me 3 different times, nope, not going to happen. You don't have the skill set to do it. And I'm like, okay, crap. So back in the work mode of the store. At that point, I'm managing the store, running it, and they're starting to want to have me train new franchise owners. So I said, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have some more money. And I'm not going to be able to move into the advertising department. So I need to start making some money to be able to sustain myself. And they tell me, no, you're capped out at the amount of money you're making. Like you're not going to be able to make any more money. You're capped at what you're going to make as working in the restaurant. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. I'm capped out at my manager's pay, but yet you have me training these franchisees that are going to be making way more money than I am. And I got to teach
Mm-hmm.
them everything I know. Like that doesn't make any sense. So I dove into starting a fashion design company and just out of the blue. I loved fashion, loved what I was seeing down in Florida from the surf and skate shops that we would venture into on our way to the beach on the weekends. Thought I could do that. I can come up with those kinds of designs, that type of stuff. It'd be fantastic. Started into this business of designing clothes, and that progressed into an event where I made a bunch of product, got set up at this music venue, and was going to be selling at this concert. At the time, it was Lollapalooza. It was the second year of Lollapalooza.
Okay.
So it had come to town at Pine Knob and Clarkston. I was had a buddy that was working there. He got me set up. I was at the front gate, ready to go. Had an investor that had put up some money, and 20 minutes before the gate opens, the production team for the tour come to me and they said, we're going to have to shut you down. And I'm like, what's going on? Why do I have to shut down? And they're like, well, we have another vendor who we have an agreement with him prior to knowing that you were going to be here, because I was working with the staff of the venue, not the tour itself.
Mm-hmm.
We had an agreement with him that we wouldn't let any other venues or vendors sell T-shirts and stuff like he has. And I said, well, I don't have stuff like he has. He has automotive type stuff. And this was Robert Stansler at the time, who owned Made in Detroit clothing.
Oh, okay.
So it was the original creator of Made in Detroit clothing. He had made an agreement with them that nobody else would sell T-shirts and hats. So he would have kind of a monopoly on that, other than what
Sure.
they were selling for merch for the tour. So we're going to shut you down. You can't sell today. We'll give you an all access pass. You can enjoy the day, enjoy the concerts, everything, but you've got to close up. And so in my mind, I'm like, crap, we just spent all this money, no opportunity to sell here. And I didn't have a plan B for that. So spiraling even farther into my depression and anxiety of things. Ultimately, things got worse after that event, to the point where finally just walked out of work one day and decided I'm done. I can't handle this life. Attempted suicide. End up in the hospital. 6 weeks inpatient, 6 weeks outpatient. Progresses from there. and then went through life after that, still not necessarily wanting to live, but just trying to figure out how to do things creatively that I could live and sustain. But I still had the depression and anxiety, and had been in therapy, cognitive therapy, looking at all these other different areas of therapy. Fortunately, my psychiatrist was always open for me to looking at other modalities outside of traditional psychiatry.
Okay.
Anything that
Good.
I could look at. And so at a certain point, this got to a scenario where I was asking questions about why I needed to exist in this world that she wasn't able to handle. And she could see that the depression was still holding on very deeply and darkly. So she suggested I go to U of M, to the Depression Center, to see how things were there. Went there for probably 6, 7 weeks. And ultimately, they had me go into the head of the department's office after one of my sessions. And he said, well, this is going to be your last day because we don't believe we can help you based on our protocols here at the university. And I'm like, wait a second. You're telling me you can't help me? He's like, yes, based on our protocols and what we're doing here with the program, we're not going to be able to help you. So at that point, I'm like, are you, you're U of M, you're one of the top
Yeah.
universities in the country. You have a depression center dedicated to studying this, and you're telling me you can't help me? So leaving from there, it was just like, all right, I'm gonna have to start looking at other modalities. What can I look at that will potentially help me? So I looked at art therapy. I was an artist. I was like, all right, let me see how this can play into what I know intrinsically as an artist versus how this might help psychologically. Looked at that, looked at EMDR therapy. Um, Even in that, uh, I experienced scenarios with the EMDR therapy that was recalling particular traumas that didn't relate to this lifetime, which I felt completely strange with because I didn't quite understand what it was. And around this time, too, starting to look at EMDR therapy, I had a friend who was a psychic, but I never really engaged with her a lot. She was married to another friend that had been working with for a while, and she had always wanted to engage with me, but I was always no, because of my background, right? How I was raised in that
Right.
environment,
Oh, yeah.
just off limits.
That's
No,
that's the devil's work.
that's witchcraft. That's everything.
Yeah.
So I finally was just at the point of, all right, what have I got to lose at this point? Let me just see what's going on. Um, and Started talking with her about different things, about, what the possibilities are outside of this realm in terms of what the afterlife is like, what happens when you die, um, the possibilities of past lives, that type of stuff. She turned me on to Dr. Brian Weiss.
Mm.
If you know any of his books,
Yeah, bet.
does a lot of work with past regression therapy,
Yeah.
to getting to the results of, and I ate every bit of that up. Like I read every single one of his books. I couldn't get them fast enough and take in that information fast enough. And I was just like, oh, wait, why? This sounds so realistic, so reasonable to me based on what I've been, accustomed to through school and everything and being in church and that kind of stuff. So finally, one day I asked her if she would do a reading for me. She said, no, you're not ready. I'm like, all right, frustrated, go away. come back again. You do a reading for me. Nope, you're not ready. Frustrated, go away. Finally, I'm like, will you do a reading for me, please? She's like, you're not ready. I'm like, yes, I am. I am ready. Like, whatever you got for me, I want it. I don't care what the outcome is. And so she settled in and started to receive. And she started explaining to me a situation that had taken place with myself and my grandfather when I was a little kid. After we had been out in the field working all day, mowing hay and baling hay. And then we went to town afterwards and we shared this experience that was so ingrained in my mind. And she starts telling me all of this information, repeating it back to me, stuff that there's no way possible that she could know.
Mm-hmm.
And as she's explaining it, she's asking me, who is this man to you? And I'm like bawling at that point. I'm like, that's my grandfather. Now, for the audience, if you remember when I started the conversation about my grandfather, he's a Southern Baptist minister. I'm in Christian school, fundamental Baptist, which is a little bit different, but still has a little bit of the same dogma and doctrine and ingrained into it. As well as now your conversation of your life story has shown a little bit of glimpse into a side of that world as well. So the irony of my grandfather being a Southern Baptist minister, channeling a message through a psychic medium here on earth of an experience that him and I shared that we didn't even tell anybody else in the family when we got back home. We just kept it. That was our secret. That was our thing. And he's telling me, this is what I want you to remember, and this is how you know it's me. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I want you to know you know more than what everybody else has led you on to believe. And it's all true. Everything you know is what you know. You don't have to guess at it anymore. It's
What wonderful validation.
Yeah, it's the truth. So from there, that opened everything for me. I was like, okay, there's way more to this than what the eye is leading to believe. Fast forward to 2017. I also learned in between there, the work of Dr. Elaine Aaron with highly sensitive persons, and the documentary that she did where she had Alanis Morissette in there as one of her students that she had worked with in terms of an artist being highly sensitive. And I was on this webinar for entrepreneurs who are highly sensitive. And at that time, there was another person on there who was an intuitive healer who was working, trying to brand her business and trying to get it out there and having some difficulty and couldn't figure some stuff out. I was expressing how I'm an artist and a creative entrepreneur who's trying to do things and trying to understand more of my sensitivity and how that can play into what I'm doing. And so in that moment of her speaking and me speaking, I thought I could probably help her out with what she needs. I know I'm creative enough to help her brand wise and help her build a new website, all that kind of stuff. So I reached out to her afterwards. And she said, yeah, I was thinking about that when you were talking as well. And I feel like I can help you. And so I've been working with her for the last 8 years. And I've grown exponentially in my healing journey from 25 plus years of psychotherapy, cognitive therapy, and things of that nature, to opening up to other modalities of healing as an artist, as a creative, to the possibilities of what can be, which has also led me to this point of starting this podcast and doing these conversations. So for the audience, the whole purpose of this conversation was to be able to bring Eric on and him share his experience and his life story and what he's delved into in transition across his life, to be able to give some more insight to the possibilities that are out there for healing for artists and creatives who may be struggling. And you have an understanding of artistry from your background with music and how powerful music is for the world in general, just
Mm-hmm.
even if it's not put out in a healing format, but it has helped many people heal over the course of years. So that plays into the conversation for this creative community as well. Um, and you mentioned you were interested in potentially being a cellist. I just did an interview with a friend of mine who is a cellist a couple episodes back, Jason Charbonneau, and he is now touring with John Lodge of the Moody Blues
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a name I'm familiar with.
as a cellist
Okay.
and guitarist and different things. But he's also gone through his own healing journey as well, going through addiction to heroin and different things like that, his sensitivity to different things. And I think all creatives are sensitive in a way that is completely different than somebody who works on the stock market or somebody who's in, business management or any of those types of things. And so, transitioning back to your story, Eric, with these new modalities that you're starting to step into and realize you have the ability to connect on a level that not everybody does, but you had a natural ability to connect, and then you've worked to develop it further. With doing so, stepping into the hypnotherapy work along with the Reiki and different things like that, how have you seen that change people's lives exponentially? You already given one example with that lady in terms of what you saw in her upper chest area.
Mm-hmm.
There was some blocked energy, but some other examples of where you saw the work that you've been able to step into and fully integrate, where it's drastically changed somebody's life.
Wow. Um, so first I want to say how interesting, even though you and I never met until an hour or so ago, that there's
Correct.
an awful lot of intertwining of similarity of
Yep.
experience and story.
Yeah.
So no coincidence. I don't believe that there are coincidences,
Me either.
um, but interesting that there is that. Um, in terms of life changing, well, I think conceptually, I would say that the most frequent and powerful thing I am a part of, and I'm kind of the tour guide rather than I'm bringing people to their own truth, their own power.
Yeah.
I have a personal disdain when somebody calls themselves a healer
Mm-hmm.
because I believe that the healing is done internally. And so, as someone who does energy work and Reiki, I'm essentially just putting people in touch with their own power and their own ability and their own natural, I can fix this way of being.
Okay.
Um, but a couple of different things pop into my head. People that have come to me, this is more in the Akashic record area or even past life regression with hypnosis. There was one young guy that came to one of the psychic fairs I was doing, and I don't even remember where, east side of the state, someplace, Brighton, New Buffalo, doesn't really matter. But when he sat down, I just immediately knew that this young man had been a monk in another lifetime. And I
Okay.
said, "Oh, you were a monk." And that didn't make him flinch at all. I said, "Let's take a look at that first." I said, because that just yelled at me as you were sitting down. And so with his permission, I got into his record and come to find out he had been a student of St. Francis of Assisi, who
Okay.
everybody knows St. Francis, right?
Yeah.
And one of my absolute favorite prayers in the world is the St. Francis prayer, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace, and on it goes. Well, in the course of this conversation with this young man, it came to light that he actually was the author of the prayer that we know as the St. Francis prayer.
Oh, wow.
And the record keepers are like, then like now, Francis had the brand, and y'all agreed that it would play better and get wider distribution under his moniker than
Okay.
some unknown monk.
Right.
And the thing that I found most interesting is none of this made this guy twitch. None of it just seemed like
Yeah.
on some really deep level, he probably already had a sense of that. And
Uh-huh.
so the funny thing is, and I joke with people all the time, is yeah, I provide a lot of affirmation and confirmation of things that you probably already know or think that you know, but
Hmm.
sometimes we need a complete stranger to confirm it because a stranger has more credibility with us than we have with ourselves.
Yeah.
And so it's about putting people back in touch with their own truth, their own power. Um, in the hypnotherapy part, I think that everybody, every single person walking around on legs, probably from before they were even born, has had an awful lot of programming.
Yeah.
Mom, dad, ministers, teachers, grandpa
Yeah.
the Southern Baptist preacher, whatever it might be. And I do believe that in almost every case it was well intended,
Yeah. Yeah.
even when it sucked.
For sure.
The
Yeah.
people were doing the best they knew how to do from where they were,
Yeah.
but oftentimes it's incredibly wrong-headed, and oftentimes it's really created sort of a roadblock and a shit show in people's lives. And
Yeah.
so you mentioned the virtual gastric band, which is the process I work with for weight loss.
Yeah.
That's a prime example of how we're born with that internal wisdom of knowing how much we should consume food wise.
Yeah.
And as a baby, mom either gave you a breast or a bottle. And when you were satisfied, you stopped.
Right.
And if it was insisted that you needed more, you probably drank it and then unceremoniously gave it back.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
honoring the wisdom, that indwelling wisdom. Well, as you got older and were eating regular food, then well-meaning mom taught you to eat with your eyes rather than honoring the wisdom of your body.
Right.
There's still food on your plate. You're still hungry. Clean up your plate. You'll be a big boy. Thanks, Mom. Um, and I say that jokingly. I mean, my mom was like that too, but that was what people did. But we learn to ignore the wisdom of our body, and we eat mindlessly. We don't eat because we're hungry. We eat because it's time to eat, or we're sad, lonely, angry, frustrated, or bored.
Yep.
We do it while we're doing email, watching TV, whatever it is. So our mind is over there someplace. We miss the signal from our body that says, I'm good, until we're so miserable that we're like, oh, I did it again. And
Right.
so all of that programming can be rewritten. I see a lot of people that were taught that they weren't enough. They weren't good enough. They weren't smart enough, talented enough. Nothing you ever do will be enough. And so then you have a generation of people that they don't know how to do anything but work, because if they're not working, they have no value.
Right.
And the underlying message of that oftentimes has been, yeah, and if you really work hard at being nearly perfect, you might one day find somebody who will love you a little bit.
Yeah.
And the underlying of that is, and if you're not feeling particularly loved, look in the mirror, because it's because you suck. Oh my. I mean,
Right.
there's a high hurdle to overcome. But in the realm of hypnosis, then we can stir all that up. We can change that script. We can override all of that programming that was not valid at the time and has never been valid in their lives. My very first hypnosis client was a guy named Monty. He's very prominent on my website. He did the virtual gastric band and really, really did a great job. He dropped about 75 pounds. His wife came to me and did the same. She was just a little short thing. And she really, I mean, I think she lost 35 pounds, and that was probably all she needed to. But
Hmm.
for both of them, and it's evident in the testimonials that they wrote, and I'm so grateful for their generosity. But I think it was Paula that said, I was so taken by how everything in my husband's life changed relative to doing the virtual gastric band that I tried it. I wanted some of that for me. And she said, and everything changed. And oh, yeah, I lost weight too. So I have found that what people come for is more often than not a symptom of the underlying condition that they're doing battle with.
Right.
And so we dig down, we go way down deep with all that and reset all that. And then the the outcome that they were after is easier to achieve. And I think that that's oftentimes true with people that are wrestling with their relationship with alcohol or drugs.
Hmm.
You know, there's an awful lot of it that's self-medicating.
Right.
Um, so you eliminate that need for self-medication, and oftentimes you can reset that understanding of that relationship as well. So
Yeah.
it's really every client, every situation is different, but yet all the underlying is so interchangeable that it kind of blows my mind. With the weight loss piece, high percentage, and majority of weight loss clients have been women,
Hmm.
because the pressure on them to be the perfect size, whatever, is a whole lot higher than for men.
Right.
Um, and I don't have the clinical data to support this, but just observationally, I know that there's a significant percentage of those women who have endured.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No
A
problem.
sign that I'm talking too much. A significant number of those individuals that have come at some point in their life have experienced abuse of every imaginable kind.
Yeah.
And a high percentage has been some sort of sexual abuse. And and I learned a long time ago that for a lot of those victims, the weight becomes that buffer between them and the world. If I'm if I'm a large person, nobody's going to look at me in that way.
Right.
Well, it isn't about attractiveness. That kind of abuse is about power and control and all kinds of other things. So the extra weight probably doesn't really protect them to the degree that they would hope that it would. But it's pretty disgusting to think about the number of individuals that are walking around with that sort of trauma, men and women, just to be clear,
Yeah.
that sort of trauma in their past and the lifelong impact that that potentially has. And of course, with what we have going on right now, um, I watched just a little bit of the Epstein survivors press conference yesterday, and it was just like, what incredibly powerful, brave young women
Yeah.
who were horribly abused as children. And I'll be honest, it pisses me off when they're referred to as young women because they were children at the time.
Right.
Um, Stepping forward, knowing that there's an element of society that will likely threaten their lives, will likely harass them and harangue them, and yet they believe that the truth is important enough that it needs to be brought to light regardless of what it takes, regardless of what the cost might be.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. For
yeah.
sure. Yeah. It was very interesting for me to see that you were doing this virtual gastric band program because I have a sister that went through the surgery, and I have a cousin as well that did that. And I know what their experience has been since then in terms of issues that they have um, because of it. So I thought it was very fascinating that this was even a thing,
Yeah.
um, that it was possible to get to this state of mind without having to go through that type of surgery. Very fascinating.
And interestingly, I don't do this part of it, but I know that there are practitioners that work with patients, clients who are going to have surgery, and they do hypnosurgery where there's no anesthetic. The people just use the power of their mind to endure the surgery pain free, even
Yeah,
though they're being cut open. And hypnobirthing is a whole nother piece of that puzzle. I do believe that if the bariatric surgeons incorporated the mind part of it, where I do my work,
right.
that the outcomes would be way better and way more sustainable. We all know people that had one surgery or another, lost 250 pounds,
Yeah,
and then over 5 years gained most of it back. Because it isn't what we eat that makes us fat, it's
yeah,
what's eating us.
yeah.
So,
It-
yeah.
I was just hearing an interview with Jillian Michaels. I don't know if
Mm.
you're familiar with Jillian.
Yep.
She was, she,
Biggest Loser.
yes, she was just talking about the experience of what some of the contestants had after they left, and then they would come back and they would look bigger, if not the same weight as what they started with. And she was describing of how it was not necessarily the fact that they were just eating this food, but it was the potential loss of a feeling or a connectedness with somebody else within their environment that they felt that they needed to have that back on.
Yeah.
They looked too extreme for that environment to go back into it and feel accepted and anew, to the point where they had to just go back and went back to eating and went off of the protocols that were put in place.
I
Which,
used to watch that show and
yeah,
I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was pretty cool
yeah,
that that sort of a thing existed. But and this was before I got doing hypnosis, but afterward I thought, man, if they would have had somebody like me working with each of these people in the mind,
right.
it could have been even more powerful, successful, and sustainable.
Yeah. And that again too, another reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you is because I feel that even in traditional psychiatry and medicine and different things like that, there's a lot of times it's a lot easier to just write out a prescription and send you back out the door, kind of a thing, versus
Well, that's the model our entire healthcare industry is built on, is not about wellness, it's about treating symptoms and having drug customers for life.
right, right. And that's where my journey has allowed me to see these differences and these opportunities of growth, healing, expansion, because I've been my own patient advocate in my journey. I've wanted to know what other possibilities are out here, what other options are here, because if I can go to the University of Michigan and have them tell me they can't help me, then I got to find something else
Yeah.
that, because that doesn't seem like the true answer that I should have been given. Um, and two, stepping into these environments, unfortunately, the world has taken words like hypnosis and turned it into something that they're able to scare people away with. From your experience and your perspective, because you said this kind of at the beginning of the conversation, that wasn't necessarily you doing something specific, like you weren't the one who's making these things happen, you're just the guide, essentially. Can you give the creative community and the audience just a brief, maybe a better explanation of what hypnosis is about versus what they may think that it is?
We were in the training, we were taught that, of course, there are areas where hypnosis is a dirty word,
Right.
where people are under the mistaken notion that it's the devil's work. And in those situations, like I know a practitioner in England who used to go into the schools, and it was called relaxation and mind management rather than
Okay.
hypnosis. It's the same
Gotcha.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay. The
Yeah.
actual practice of hypnosis, I have a wonderful worn out old leather recliner over here, and I have a machine that connects to headsets, and I put on a headset with a microphone, and the client has a headset on, and I cue the music, and then eventually I bring in the ocean waves, and I'm just talking them into a wonderful, relaxed place,
Right.
and just taking them deeper and deeper. There's no gold watch. There's no, hocus pocus. It's all just the power of language and their mind. And it doesn't matter if they believe in hypnosis. I mean, I've
Yeah.
had I've had people that I know are just barely under the surface. And I mean, some are engineers and some are lawyers, and that analytical mind that maybe has a little trouble wrapping that mind around this woo-woo stuff.
Yeah.
But yet they come, and so then when I get them all the way down to that wonderful relaxed place, then I pretty much open their skull and stir around in their brains, which isn't really true, but it's then that creating those alternative images.
Yeah.
Um, there was a young woman that came to me who was anorexic, and I know her parents, and they had done everything they could imagine to try and help their daughter get past that.
Yeah.
And the mom and I were talking one day, and she said, "Could hypnosis help her?" And I said, "Well, it can't hurt." I said, "The
Right.
worst thing that can happen is nothing." And I certainly would be willing and eager to work with your daughter, to help. And
Yeah.
I essentially took the virtual gastric band protocol and turned it 90 degrees. And it was conceptually pretty much the same. But for this young woman, I said in our early conversation, I said, "So do you remember, was there an event where the roots of this situation came home to roost? And she said, oh, yeah. She said, as a senior in high school, and we were getting ready for the winter formal, and a bunch of my girlfriends and I went shopping for dresses, and we're all in the dressing room. And one of my girlfriends just made a passing comment that hit me wrong. And from that moment forward, and she was just a tiny little thing.
Yeah.
And but from that moment forward, her whole image of her body had changed horribly.
Right.
But we were able to help. Essentially, we created some different neural pathways around that triggering event, so that if the memory of that started to float in, she had 4 or 5 different ways that she could have gone around that event to a healthier, better outcome.
Okay.
And your mind doesn't know the difference between reality and what gets programmed in there.
Right. Right. Amazing. Yeah, creating those new neural pathways, that's huge. Huge. With some of the work that you do in regards to the Akashic Records, probably a large portion of the audience has no idea what that is and what that pertains to. Can you give a little bit more of a explanation of that? You started at the beginning, but if you could just expound a little bit more.
Sure. The Akashic record contains the complete history of your soul, all lifetimes, past, present, and future, everything you've ever been, done, said, or thought, or will be, do, say, or think. However, it does not take free will off the table. And I
Gotcha.
tell people, your hands are at 10 and 2, and you're going straight down the road, and you know if you don't turn the wheel, that's where you're going to end up. But
Right.
you always have the right to change the wheel, to change your destination. A lot of times, probably always, the people who are in our lives in this particular lifetime have been in our life in another way
Yes.
in another lifetime.
Yeah.
And I have some friends that are very much into soul groups,
Yeah.
and they recognize who those people are, and the people who are in adjacent soul groups that, you know, that's way deeper than I've gone into any of that. But I do find that spouses often have been in each other's lives frequently, offspring the same, gender roles change. Sometimes you're the wife, sometimes you're the husband. Sometimes your kids have been your parent in another lifetime.
Yeah.
And I'll say, if your son has not already said to you, yeah, that isn't the way we did it when I was your dad, be ready for that to happen, because that's part of the push-pull there.
Yeah.
Um, there are people, a decent number of people who, part of the information that I've received while doing the reading was that they were relatively highly placed in predominantly the Catholic Church. They were either nuns or priests or bishops. I don't think I've had any cardinals or popes. Um, but in those people, oftentimes there's a bit of disdain
Okay.
toward organized religion in general and the Catholic Church in particular. And as the record keepers have described it time and again, it's like, yeah, once you've seen how the sausage is made, you kind of lose your appetite for sausage.
Right.
And but more often than not, people are like, yeah, oh yeah, I was raised Catholic, and no, thank you. Um, and the realization that many of them have is that within any organized religion, at least the ones that I'm familiar with, a lot of the basis is about you need the church, the priest, or the minister to be your go-between between you and the creator.
Right.
I don't believe that.
I
I
don't either.
believe that the God is indwelling in all of us and that we all have that direct connect. But how are they going to pay for their cathedrals and their hush money payments or what, whatever there is, if people realize that they can go right to the source?
Yeah.
And interestingly, the Catholic Church, as I understand it, and I've not been Catholic in this lifetime, but I know I have been in the past, is probably one of the most mystical religions, at least that I'm aware of. And yet, no, the lay people can't do that. You need to be the priest in order to talk to Archangel Michael.
Right.
Uh, Michael and I talk on a regular basis. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's fascinating. It's wonderful as well. One of the things that I would like to share with the audience in terms of a way that I've been able to come to the full understanding of what potentially a past life could be. Because I was raised in a fundamental Baptist background and environment, the story that was told was that there is no reincarnation possible. It doesn't happen. But what I always refer to and try to give the example of is when Christ died and then he rose again. When he went to see the disciples, he was in his soul spirit form. And he had to transition back into a physical form for them to realize that it was him. And he laid out his hands and showed them the holes.
yeah,
He also, in that conversation with them, explained to them that he was going to be giving them all of the powers that he had and more on top of that. So, the one thing that is always true and has been, I haven't heard anybody negate it in any form or fashion, depending on the denomination or religion that it is that the soul is always eternal. Fundamental Baptists say a soul is eternal, you're going to go to hell or you're going to go to heaven.
yeah,
One way, that soul is going to go to one of those places. So in my mind, if the soul is eternal and Christ had the potential to return to form again, and he said to the disciples, you have all of my abilities plus, would we not have the same opportunity as a soul to have multiple lifetimes, to
yeah,
experience new things, to learn new things, to learn what we didn't learn the last time around, have it presented again?
yeah.
Am I tracking right with that thought process?
That's totally in alignment with where my thoughts and beliefs are. Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah,
I just wanted to put that out there in terms of how I've come to the place of understanding that I have, that there are things that have created a trauma or an experience that I had that had been carried through lifetimes that I've had to work at healing so that I break that pattern,
yeah,
as well as generational experiences and traumas that have either been on the father's side or the mother's side or down the line,
right.
that if it was my agreement this time to try and break that cycle, then that's what I need to do and to be working on. And that's part of what I've come to with my healing journey as well, is starting to understand that more fully, work on healing some of those things, breaking some of those patterns, to get to this place. Now, I know I still have farther along to go. I know there's more to do. Um,
As evidenced by the fact that you're still here.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I didn't get to exit. Didn't get
Yeah.
to exit. And one of the things that I even come to the realization of from that perspective was that, and this hit me like a ton of bricks, was that that was my go-to out. That was my go-to reaction of if something wasn't going the way I felt should have gone at that point in time in that lifetime, that I would just check out and remove.
Okay.
The understanding that I'm at now is that we can do that over and over, but until we learn that lesson, we're just going to
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
cycling over again.
It's
One,
interesting. I've come to believe that when we come into a lifetime, we have 5 natural exit points
okay,
built in.
okay,
And we come up on one of those exits and we go, nah, I'm going to keep going. And, or we say, yeah, this is as good a place as any to get off. And I guess my favorite example of that is, gosh, a number of years ago, 10, 15, I don't know, all the years run together. I had a brother-in-law who died in a plane crash into Lake Michigan.
oh wow,
And they were flying. It was he and his best friend were the pilot and the co-pilot, and they were flying the Alma, Michigan. I think it was the superintendent of schools and his doctor and his wife. They were flying him from Alma to Mayo Clinic because
okay,
he had developed a nasty cancer. And it was one of Earl's favorite things was to do these medical um, road trips in the airplane. Well, they
yeah,
crashed into Lake Michigan.
mm,
And while we were waiting, we realized that we were those people where you see something going on, you go, oh, that poor family, they're waiting. And, well, yeah, that was us. Until they eventually, it was about a week later, they found 4 of the 5 people died and the other guys survived. Um, but I looked at that and I was talking to my sister who was married to him and his daughter and son-in-law, and we were all there. And I said, well, let me throw this on the table. I believe that we have these potentially 5 exit points.
okay,
And so think about Earl.
yeah,
He's up there doing the thing that lights him up more than anything in the world.
right,
And his mom and dad both had Alzheimer's, horrible, long, lingering, really nasty way to go. I
yeah,
said, so maybe he's up there flying today on this beautiful day, and he sees that the next exit is Alzheimer's, and maybe the next one is a long, painful, lingering cancer. And maybe he said, you know what? This would be a good day to die. And we kicked that around a bit, and everybody in the room was just like, they loved it. They loved
mm,
the idea of we make a choice that Earl chose that time to go. And later, I had a session with a medium who said that that was accurate, but additionally, Earl knew that there was stuff coming up with people that he loved, that he would be able to be of more service and better service from the spirit side than he would have been able to be walking around as a human. And I
interesting,
don't think that I'd ever really thought about it from that angle before. So that was pretty interesting.
very much, and even more so for me again with the similarities of what we're.
Another coincidence.
Yes, yes. Um, my father passed away at the end of 2021 after a journey with lung disease. And it was based off of being in that automotive environment for so many years, around those asbestos breaks and brake dust and all that kind of stuff. And probably about 3 months before he passed, I had this vision of his grandparents, or his parents rather, my grandparents, because after I had the connection that I did with my grandfather on my mother's side, I had always wondered, like, why can I not connect with my dad's parents? Why am I not able to see anything about them or connect with them? But about 3 months before he passed away, I had this visual that comes into play, as it does for me. It's like a cloud opening of a movie. This is kind of how it is viewed. And I saw my grandpa and grandpa, my mom's parents. They were there, and they had already passed on at that point as well. But they had this huge following, just is beyond what you could see. And it made me think about my grandfather having this little small country church when he was alive. And now that he's passed, kind of still doing the same thing, but yet on the
On a
other
larger
side.
scale.
Right. And what I saw in that moment as well, when I saw them, they were standing and waiting at this one spot that looked to be like a plateau of what might lead into heaven, potentially. Couldn't tell that that was the case, but it was this plateaued area that they were at. And I saw my dad's parents come in and meet with them. And the sense that I got was that they were looking to me for answers of where to go. And I just put my hand out and pointed to my other grandparents, which they knew in real life.
In life, yeah.
Right. And they went over to them, and the amount of joy that came to them, and the realization that they had got to where they were supposed to be at that point in time, and were able to be a part of that reconnection.
Yeah.
Then when my dad passed 3 months later, I didn't know that that was going to be the amount of time, but that's what it ended up being. About a half an hour after my mom called from the hospital, because that was right at the ending of COVID, but all the restrictions were still in place. So
Sure.
I wasn't able to go to the hospital. She was the only one. And I didn't really want to have to be in that environment and watch that take place again as well, from what I had experienced with my grandfather early on. But about half an hour after she called and said that he passed, he's gone, I got the same visual again, that opening up, that cloud vision, and what he was seeing was both sets of grandparents waiting for him. And he couldn't believe what he was seeing, Eric. The amount of joy and disbelief that he had at what he was seeing again at that point, again, essentially, based on what I was raised in here on earth and in that fundamental Baptist environment. It was amazing. And for me, it was just like, okay, he's good. He's good.
Yep.
And everything that he thought he believed because of that environment was even more. It was even more. And I think that a lot of times that's the thing that doesn't get presented in religious environments nowadays very often is that faith that they say you're supposed to have. It's almost as if there's a stopgap on it, to where you can have it up to this point, but we can't really tell you that it's more than what's just written in this book. And what's written in this book is all there is.
Yeah, except no.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's that similarities that I'm saying again with our conversation. With the opportunity to find healing for any creative who's experiencing depression, anxiety, addictions, frustrations with moving forward in their creative journey, to have an opportunity to work with somebody like yourself, from my perspective, it would be a huge potentially life altering opportunity. But from your perspective, for the creatives that are out there, who I feel might be a little bit more connected to the creator than most because of the gifts and talents that we have, the opportunity to open understanding of things that they may not completely be able to have here on earth. How much words are slipping from what I'm trying to get to here. How much possibility is there for their mind to expand into the realities of what's beyond, and what they have opportunity to do so here in terms of finding healing, progressing their careers, so on and so forth, by working with somebody like yourself?
Well, I think it's enormous potential.
That's my
Yeah,
thought.
yeah. Do you, as you're creating your art, is it coming through you or from you?
When it's
Are you doing like channeled type creation?
when If I'm doing branding and stuff like that, I will slip into some of that after the initial conversations with a client.
Okay.
If I'm doing my own personal artwork, in the past, I've got to the place where I've felt it being complete channeling,
Okay.
just feeling
You
of
get out of the way and allow it to come through.
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So at different times, I've been able to experience both sides of it.
Okay. Cool.
The full channel stuff, I went away from it years ago because I did a bunch of pieces and they were Native American based and themed, and my dad's boss at the time was a collector of Native American art, and I needed money. And these pieces, I had spent 10 to 12 hours each in creating them, and I had about 6 or 7 of them. He wanted to buy them all when he saw them. And so my dad was like, hey, he's willing to buy. You need some money. Here's the opportunity to,
Right.
get some cash to clear up a few things. And so I sold them for that little amount of money that he offered, which probably wasn't even the value of one of those actually original pieces. But after that experience, it just put this mindset in me that I can't open up like that again, because
Oh,
because it's not going to be valued. Although one of the things that I'm looking at now, after a few weeks of contemplation and some healing work that I've done prior to this interview, is stepping back into that full channeling, and doing what I'm calling essential spirit paintings, ironically broken down to ESP. Um, but it's working with somebody on an individual basis and tapping into who might be their spirit guide, their spirit animal, any of those types of things
That's very popular. That's cool stuff.
that could well, I didn't know it was popular. That's a surprise to me, for one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but stepping into this as a way of potentially just giving them some additional information, as well as something that is a strong reminder that we're connected to everything.
Yeah.
We're connected to all of the creation that has been made by the Creator. And we can learn from all of these connections if we're willing to just look at it, be open minded, and incorporate some of the characteristics into our lifestyle.
Mhm.
So that's something that I'm
I have two spirit paintings
okay.
that two different artists have done for me. One is I believe it's oil or acrylic. The other is ink,
Okay.
and eye-opening, holy crap, incredible experiences. The one woman is from, oh, this side of Flint, someplace. I
Okay.
forget the town that she lives in, but um, that's one of the things that she does. She also intuitively does the spirit guide paintings where she tunes into who your primary guides are and
Right. Yeah.
creates a piece that reflects them. The other woman does it with ink. She washes the paper with alcohol and then is intuitively guided what colors to put a drop here, a drop there. And then she gets out a blow dryer
Oh,
and
wow.
moves the ink around. But the imagery, the stuff that's embedded in there randomly,
Yeah.
um, is incredible. It's really very fun. So
Phenomenal.
yeah, yeah.
Very good. Very good. Well, I think that's a great place for us to be able to close out today. And
This has been really fun for me. I appreciate it very much.
excellent. I'm grateful, truly grateful, and glad that it was a good experience for you as well. Definitely. One of the things that I always want to remind the audience at the end of each one of these episodes and conversations is to always listen to your heart, but also be kind to your mind.
Yeah.